Hi friends, this is Callie. Thanks so much for joining me today for a fun interactive card using my favorite things, Twist and Turn Interactive Dynamics. Today I'm using the Scenting Sweet Celebration Wishes stamp set, and these sweet little critters will be dancing on the card. I'm excited to share this project with you, so let's dive right in. I started by stamping my images with MFT's Black Licorice Hybrid ink to color using Copic markers. And for the sake of time, I'm only sharing how I color the penguin. I think this is one of the more helpful images for you to see, as coloring with images that appear to be black might seem more intimidating than it really is. My biggest tip for you here is to actually not use the color black. Instead, use a darker gray and blend it with lighter shades of gray. So for my card today, I'm using C8, C5, and C2 for the darker penguin suit, and then using the lighter grays of C1, C0, and C00 for the remaining body. When coloring, you can start with the darkest color first or the lightest color first. I tend to start with the darker color first for smaller areas because I've found that when you lay down a layer of the light shade first, it can increase bleeding, and you don't want that for smaller spaces. So I'm laying down the darkest color first in the creases and crevices where I think the shadows should be. And then I lay down the medium shade over that, then blend it out with the lightest color. I don't really have a method for coloring either. I don't see light coming from the top right hand corner or the top left hand corner. It's more of a straight on view for me, so I tend to color the darkest shades on the sides of each section and then blend towards the center to create the lighter areas. Once I have finished coloring all of my images and die cut them, I add white gel highlights. I do this after because I have also found that the white gel highlights can be rubbed off on your top cutting plate when going through the die cutting machine. For my 4" by 8.5" slimline card today, I had to create a longer pull tab. So I've cut a strip that is 3/4 by 8.5 inches long and used the pull tab die from the die set to round the corners by doing some partial die cutting. To secure all the links, we're connecting them today with mini brads so that they can move freely. Be sure that the links that have center holes are running parallel to each other before securing your brads. Another note to make here is that you want the top of your mini brad to be smaller than the opening of your washers. That way the washer can be adhered over the brad later and sit flush on your paper. Now to add holes to my pull tab, I'm arranging my links where I want them to go before placing pencil marks on the tab using the die as a guide. I die cut this twice to create my 4 holes and connected my links to the pull tab. Then we'll need to add 4 more holes to a card panel that will secure your mechanism for your card. I'm using the same die as before as a guide to mark where my holes will go, except this time I'm using a piercing tool and piercing pad to make my holes. I just wanted to show you that there are more ways than one to create your holes, and if you have a long reach hole punch, you can use that as well. Now that I have my mechanism attached to this back panel, I can go ahead and set that aside to work on my card front. I'm ink blending a panel now that is the same size as the back panel that I used previously to secure my mechanism to, using spun sugar, worn lipstick, festive berries, and seedless preserves. I'm using a jumbo dauber to ink blend my panel, starting with the lightest color and blending upward towards the darkest color. Then I sprayed my panel with some water to add texture and interest. I think this also helps hide any inconsistencies or imperfections from the ink blending, if you're worried about that. You may have noticed that I left some fingerprints up there towards the top of my panel, where I didn't protect the panel with a barrier of cardstock, so the splatters really helped me out here. And after ink blending, we want to create the openings for the mechanism for our moving pieces. To do this, I'm using vellum as a guide. This is a really helpful tip that I learned from Rachel Alvarado's blog, and I think it's pure genius. I'm tracing the center brads on the vellum to mark where I want the openings to be cut. And you can use the die that cuts out 2 openings at once, or you can use a single die to cut out the circles one at a time, so 4 openings in my case. I don't like the die impressions, so I use the single circle to cut it out 4 times to minimize the impressions. As you can see, the openings are not straight, but that's okay because it doesn't need to be perfect. It's forgiving depending on the size of your images, and you can arrange them accordingly later to make sure that they line up perfectly. Now before attaching everything, we want to make sure there's plenty of space for your mechanism to move. So I'm using foam adhesive all the way around my card and adding stoppers at the top left and top right so that the linkages don't extend past where I want them to go. I gave myself an inch to work with on the pull tab, so I knew exactly where I wanted my card to start and stop. At this point, you'll want to stamp your sentiment, unless you decide to do a sentiment strip or if you forget. I stamped my sentiment off camera using my MISTI and then removed all my backing to attach my card front. I'm making sure everything is moving freely before I continue. In order for the elements to twist and turn on your card, we will need to create a spacer or a washer stack so that the images sit above the card panel. I stacked 4 washers so that it's flush with my top panel, then attached foam squares over that because I wanted my critters to sit up a little bit higher for some extra dimension. To make sure that there's extra support under each of my images, because the only thing attaching them to the card is the 1 square foam tape, I'm adding foam tape all around the images in other areas also, so that there's enough height and support. I did this with 3M foam tape and just left the backing on them so that there's support but it doesn't stick to my card front. Now all of these critters are dancing on this card and it is just so cute. I'm attaching the rest of my images, filling in the open areas to create my scene and give it a finishing touch. Finally, I need to create a card base. To do this, I cut a panel that is 8 inches by 8.5 inches, and I scored down the middle using my mini scoreboard and Teflon bone folder. Once I do that, I can burnish my line so that I can create my card base and adhere the 2 parts together. The last thing I need to do is trim off the overhang on that banner, and then my card is done. I love this card so much, and I hope you did too. I appreciate that you stopped by and hope you all have a wonderful day. Bye everyone!